The reflection in the glass. Moving into a new apartment should be an exciting time. A fresh start, a clean slate. But for me, it was nothing short of a nightmare. I had just graduated college, and the job market was unforgiving. So when I found a small, affordable apartment in a quiet neighborhood, I jumped at the opportunity. It wasn't much. Barely enough room for a bed and a desk, but it had everything I needed. It was old, yes, but there was something about it that felt comforting. The smell of aged wood and dust made me feel like I was stepping into a place with history, a place with stories to tell. I didn't know it at the time, but the apartment had more stories to tell than I could ever imagine. The first few nights were fine, nothing out of the ordinary. I went about my life as usual, unpacking, setting up my small living space, and getting to know the area. But one evening, as I was sitting on the couch, scrolling through my phone, I noticed something strange in the corner of the room. There, on the wall above the fireplace, was an old mirror. I hadn't noticed it before. It wasn't anything fancy, just a simple rectangular piece, the kind you'd find at a yard sale. The glass had a foggy quality to it, as if it hadn't been cleaned in years, and the frame was chipped in places. At first, I shrugged it off. It was just a mirror, nothing to worry about. But the more I looked at it, the more I felt uncomfortable. It wasn't the mirror itself that bothered me, but rather what it reflected. The reflection was distorted, fuzzy, as if the mirror was trying to show something, but couldn't quite capture it. I thought maybe it was the poor lighting in the room, but it looked strange nonetheless. That night, as I was preparing for bed, I noticed something even stranger. The reflection in the mirror was no longer just of the room. It was showing a figure, barely visible at first, but unmistakable. A person, a man, tall and thin, standing motionless in the reflection. I whipped around, but there was no one in the room with me, just the empty space. I approached the mirror cautiously, my pulse quickening. The reflection remained. I stepped closer. The figure was still there, standing still. His face was blurred, impossible to make out, but his body was rigid, almost unnatural in its stillness. I reached out to touch the glass, my fingers brushing against the cool surface. The reflection of the man didn't move. I turned away and went to bed that night, trying to push the image out of my mind. It must have been a trick of the light, I thought, a figment of my imagination. But sleep didn't come easy. I tossed and turned, my mind racing with thoughts of what I had seen. The next day, I tried to forget about it. I went to work, distracted but functioning. But when I returned that evening, it happened again. This time, the figure in the reflection was closer. I walked into the living room, and there it was again. The tall man, standing just a few feet away from the fireplace, in the reflection. He hadn't been there when I entered the room, but there he was, right in front of me. I froze, staring at him. His features were still indistinct, but his presence was undeniable. It was like the reflection was alive, conscious of me, aware of my every movement. I took a step back, my body rigid with fear. And then, he moved. The figure in the mirror shifted slightly, as if tilting its head toward me. A shiver ran down my spine. I reached for my phone, my hands trembling, trying to take a picture. But when I looked back up, the man was gone. The reflection was once again of just the room, empty and still. I backed away from the mirror, my heart racing. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the corner of the room watching the mirror from across the room, half expecting the figure to appear again. But it didn't. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The next few days were worse. The figure in the mirror appeared every night, closer and closer each time. His movements were subtle at first, just a shift in position. But then one evening, he stepped forward. It wasn't a slow, natural movement. It was more like he was being dragged, his body jerking in ways that seemed unnatural, as though something was pulling him toward me. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as I backed away from the mirror, but it didn't stop. The figure kept coming, closer and closer. His face was still a blur, but I could feel his presence growing stronger, more oppressive, like he was suffocating me. Every time I looked into the mirror, he was there, inching closer, step by step. I tried to leave the apartment. I tried to stay with friends. But no matter where I went, I couldn't escape the feeling that something was following me. The whispers, soft at first, but growing louder, would haunt me in every room I entered. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that the reflection was alive and waiting for me. Finally, on a particularly sleepless night, I decided to confront it. I stood in front of the mirror, staring at the figure. I was exhausted, trembling with fear, but I was determined. I wanted to understand. What was this thing? Why was it in my mirror? Why was it watching me? As I stared at the reflection, something shifted inside me. The figure in the mirror moved again, and this time, he didn't stop. His face slowly became clearer. It wasn't the face of a man at all. It was my face, my own reflection, but it wasn't me. The eyes were empty, hollow, and the skin was deathly pale. The smile that crept onto the figure's lips was twisted, unnatural. I could see it now. The man in the mirror wasn't a man at all. It was a version of me, distorted, trapped in that glass. A part of me that had been hiding, waiting to get out. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. The reflection began to laugh, a hollow, mocking sound that echoed in my head. The laugh was mine, but it wasn't. It was wrong. In that moment, I understood. The mirror wasn't showing me a person. It was showing me my darkest self, my deepest fears, the part of me that I had locked away, afraid to confront. And now, it was free. The glass cracked. I don't know what happened after that. One moment I was standing there, staring at my reflection, and the next, I was waking up in the hallway, my head throbbing, the apartment door wide open. I don't know how I got out, but I ran. I ran as far as I could until I found myself outside, in the cold night air, breathing heavily. The apartment was abandoned by the time I returned. The mirror was gone. But I know the truth now. I know that the reflection wasn't just a trick. It was a warning, a part of me I can never escape. And every now and then when I look into a mirror, I can see it, just for a moment. The hollow eyes, the twisted smile. It's waiting for me. Thank you for reading The Reflection in the Glass. I hope this story brought chills and captivated your imagination. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe to NoSleep Tales on YouTube for more spine-tingling narratives. Share your thoughts and let me know what themes or elements you'd like to see in future stories.